My wife cheated on me for months while planning to replace me with someone richer. I found her secret new life planning folder with all the candidates, so I exposed her in front of all her friends and family. I'm 34 years old. I'm a mechanical engineer, and what happened 6 months ago basically destroyed my 8-year marriage. But not in the way you'd expect. I mean, yes, there was betrayal and lies and all that, but the way everything ended was, let's say, very different from how these things normally play out. I guess I should start at the beginning, when everything seemed fine, or at least that's what I thought. I met Lauren when we were both like 24, at a mutual friend's party. She was pretty fun, and we had good chemistry, or so I thought. We got married 2 years later, and for the first few years, everything was relatively normal. The typical couple fights, but nothing major. I worked as an engineer at a manufacturing company, made good money, like a salary that allowed us to live comfortably without her having to work full time. Lauren had studied graphic design but never really practiced it. She did freelance work here and there, but nothing consistent. And, honestly, I never pressured her because we could afford it. I paid all the bills, the mortgage, her car, her credit cards, basically everything. And she managed the house and supposedly looked for clients for her design business that never really took off. Looking back, I should have seen it coming, but you never expect the person you married to be literally planning to replace you, you know? The first real sign was like a year ago, when I went to pick her up from the gym because she'd left her wallet at home and needed it. I got there and saw her outside with her best friend Heather and 2 other friends, and they were laughing about something. I walked over from the parking lot and heard Heather say something like, "And when you find one with more money, you're going to forget all these boring years." And Lauren laughed and said, "Oh God, yes. I definitely need an upgrade." The others laughed too, and I just stood there like 3 meters away from them, totally frozen. Lauren saw me and her. Face changed completely, like from amused to panicked in 2 seconds, and she said, "Oh, hi, babe, I didn't hear you coming." And I just gave her the wallet without saying anything and left. That night I confronted her. I said, "What the hell was that I heard today?" And she acted like it was nothing, like I was overreacting. She told me, "Daniel, please, it was just girl talk. Everyone says those things. It doesn't mean anything." Heather was joking about a show we watched, and I said, "It didn't sound like a joke, Lauren. It sounded like you were talking about our relationship." And she got angry, told me I was insecure and controlling for making a drama out of a conversation between friends. The argument lasted like 2 hours, and in the end, I ended up kind of apologizing, which is ridiculous now that I think about it. But that's how manipulation works, right? After that, I started noticing things. Small stuff at first. Like Lauren spent a lot of time on her phone and flipped it over every time I walked into the room. She went out more often, supposedly with friends or to look for potential clients, but she always came home late with vague excuses. She started dressing up more, like full makeup and new clothes to go to the grocery store, which seemed weird to me, but I didn't say anything because after the gym fight I was afraid she'd accuse me of being controlling again. She became more physically distant too. Always had headaches or was too tired. And when I tried to have serious conversations about us, she'd change the subject or say we were fine, and that I worried too much. Things got more serious like 8 months ago, when my best friend Justin called me and said, "Bro, I need to talk to you about something uncomfortable." We met for coffee and he was super nervous, like bouncing his leg nonstop, and finally he told me, "I saw Lauren last night at that fancy Italian restaurant downtown. The one with the patio, with the little lights. You know which one? And she was with a guy." I said, "Well, maybe it was a client or something." And Justin shook his head and said, "No, man, it wasn't a business meeting. They were holding hands across the table, and she was laughing in a way that, I don't know how to explain it, but it looked intimate. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I literally had to take deep breaths to keep from throwing up right there in Starbucks." I asked Lauren that night where she'd been the day before, and she told me with Heather at her house watching movies. I said, "Are you sure? You didn't go anywhere else?" And she looked at me weird and said, "No, why?" And I just stayed quiet because I didn't know how to confront her without her getting defensive again. But from that moment on, I started paying more attention, noticing patterns. She'd go out on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, always from 6 to 9 p.m., always with the same excuse that it was her graphic design group or client meetings. On weekends, sometimes she'd disappear for hours, saying she was going to the gym or shopping. 6 months ago, everything exploded, but in a way, I never planned. Lauren asked to borrow my laptop because hers was supposedly updating and she needed to check something. She left it open on the kitchen table when she went to the bathroom, and I don't know what came over me. Like normally, I'm not one to check other people's stuff, but something in my head said, do it now. I opened the browser history, and there it was. Pages and pages of Tinder, Bumble, Match.com, all open. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. I went to her email, which was automatically logged in, and found messages, dozens of messages with different men, all flirty, some explicitly sexual. But what really killed me was a folder I found in her saved documents called New Life Planning. I opened it, and there was a Word document with a list. Literally a list of characteristics she was looking for in her next partner. Things like minimum income $150K, minimum height 6 feet, willing to travel internationally, no previous children preferable. There was another document that was basically her divorce strategy, notes about how she could get more in the settlement if she waited until I received my annual work bonus, which would be in December. How she could argue she contributed to the marriage even though she didn't work. Notes about alimony laws. There were screenshots of conversations with Heather where they discussed her candidates and laughed about me, calling me boring and predictable. I sat there, looking at that laptop for what felt like hours, but was probably only like 15 minutes. Lauren came back from the bathroom and saw me looking at the screen, and her face went white, like literally lost all color. She said, "What are you doing? That's private." And I just looked up and said, "Private? Your detailed plan to divorce me and find someone with more money is private?" And she tried to close the laptop, but I moved it away. She started, crying immediately, saying she could explain it, that she was confused, that it didn't mean anything, that she'd never acted on those plans. But I told her, "Lauren, I have screenshots of your conversations with multiple guys. I have messages where you arranged to meet them. My best friend saw you on a date. Don't treat me like I'm stupid." The next hour was a disaster. She alternated between crying, getting angry at me for invading her privacy, and trying to minimize everything by saying she was just exploring options because she felt trapped in the marriage, as if that was a reasonable justification. I was calmer than I expected, like a weird calm, and I told her to go sleep in the guest bedroom because I needed space to think. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I stayed in the living room with my own laptop, downloading all the evidence I could, emailing it to myself, taking pictures with my phone of her laptop screen, everything I could think of. The next morning, I called a lawyer, a guy named William, who'd been recommended to me by a coworker who'd gotten divorced the year before. I went to his office that same day and showed him everything, all the screenshots, all the conversations, the planning folder. William whistled low when he saw the document about divorce strategy and said, "Well, at least we know she was already planning this, which works in your favor." He explained that since I was the sole provider and had clear evidence of infidelity and planned divorce intentions, I probably wouldn't have to pay alimony, or at least it would be minimal. He told me to start preparing myself financially, to open a separate bank account, to document all expenses, to basically prepare for war. But over the next few weeks, I did exactly that. I opened an account at a different bank and started depositing my salary there, leaving only the minimum in the joint account for house bills. I changed the passwords on all my personal accounts. I stopped doing all the extra things I normally did, like fixing stuff around the house, planning outings, doing the big grocery shopping. Lauren obviously noticed the change but didn't say anything directly. She just complained passive-aggressively that I was distant or that I wasn't contributing like before. The tension in the house was unbearable. We basically didn't talk except for what was necessary. We slept in separate rooms. It was like living with a roommate you hate. I thought we were going to proceed with the divorce in a relatively civilized way, like we sign the papers and each go our own way. But then Lauren did something that changed all my plans. Like 3 weeks after I discovered everything, she came to me and said she wanted us to go to a couple's weekend at a lake house that her friends, Stephanie and Adam, had rented. That several couples were going, Christina and Tony, Paul and his girlfriend, Basically, the whole group of friends we used to socialize with. I told her, "Are you kidding? Why would I want to go to a couple's weekend with you?" And she said, "Because we're still married and people are going to start asking questions. We need to keep up appearances at least a little longer." I realized in that moment what she was doing. She wanted to maintain the facade of a happy marriage in front of everyone while continuing with her secret plans, probably so she could control the narrative when we finally got divorced, so she could tell everyone that I was the problem or that we simply grew in different directions. Whatever excuse that made her look good. And something in me broke, like not from sadness but from a cold rage, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to that weekend, but it's not going to be like she thinks. I called William and told him the plan I'd come up with. He laughed, told me that legally there was no problem, that everything I had was legitimate evidence obtained from shared devices in our home, and that if I wanted to do things dramatically, that was my personal decision. But from a legal standpoint, we were fine. He prepared the divorce papers for me to have ready, all signed on my side, only needing her signature. I put the papers in my briefcase, along with a USB drive that had all the screenshots and evidence organized in a folder. The weekend arrived, and we drove in separate cars because I supposedly had to stop by the office first. The lake house was nice, like modern, with big windows and a deck overlooking the water. Everyone arrived, the 3 couples plus us. And Lauren was in full actress mode, hugging me, kissing me on the cheek, calling me baby in front of everyone. And I played along because I knew what was coming. During Friday night's dinner, everyone talked about their lives, their jobs, their plans, and Lauren told stories about us like we were the perfect couple, even making up things that never happened. And I just nodded and smiled. Saturday night after dinner, we were all in the living room, like relaxing, after eating. Some drinking wine, and someone suggested putting on music or a movie. I said, "Actually, I have something I'd like to show you all. Something important," and I connected my laptop to the TV on the wall. Lauren looked at me confused and said, "What are you going to show?" And I said, "You'll see." I opened the evidence folder I had on the USB and started projecting on the big TV, so everyone could see perfectly. First appeared the screenshots of her dating app profiles with her photos and her descriptions where it said she was in the process of separating, which was a lie. I didn't know anything about this until weeks ago. Then I projected selected conversations with different guys, where she flirted shamelessly, where she arranged to meet them, where she sent photos. The room went completely silent, like you could hear people breathing. Lauren stood up and shouted, "Daniel, what the fuck are you doing? Turn that off!" But I didn't move. I just kept showing images. Then I projected the new life planning document, that list of characteristics she was looking for in her next husband, and I read out loud the part about minimum income and minimum height. I projected her divorce strategy, her plans to wait until after my bonus, her notes on how to maximize what she could get from the settlement. Finally, I projected screenshots of conversations with Heather where they laughed about me, where they called me boring and basic, where they discussed which of her candidates had better potential. Lauren was crying hysterically at that point, screaming that I was a monster, that how dare I humiliate her like that, trying to rip the laptop out of my hands, but I just closed everything and stood in front of everyone. I told them, "The reason I'm showing you this is because I want you to know the truth before she starts making up stories about why we're getting divorced. I've spent 8 years being a faithful husband, providing for this woman, paying all her bills while she supposedly built her graphic design career that never existed, and all this time she was literally comparing replacement options and planning how to get the maximum money out of me. So here's the truth, unfiltered, without her edited version. I took the divorce papers out of my briefcase and put them in front of her on the coffee table. These are the divorce papers. They're already signed on my side. They just need your signature, Lauren. And when we get back to the city, I expect you to start looking for somewhere to live because the house is mine. I bought it before we got married, and it's only in my name." Everyone was in total shock, like nobody knew what to say or where to look. Stephanie had her mouth open. Christina was crying. Adam was looking at me with a mix of horror and respect. I don't know. It was weird. Lauren kept screaming, saying I'd ruined her life, that I was an emotional abuser, That how dare I expose her like that in front of her friends. But Heather, her supposed best friend, told her, "Lauren, shut up already. This is your fault. You can't play the victim now." I grabbed my stuff, my laptop, my briefcase, my keys, and told everyone, "I'm sorry your weekend got ruined, but I wasn't going to let her control the narrative of this situation." I walked to my car and left. The drive back was like 2.5 hours, and the whole time I was shaking, like not from fear but from pure adrenaline. I couldn't believe I'd actually done it, that I'd exposed everything in front of all her friends like that. Part of me felt terrible. Like, who does that? What kind of person publicly humiliates their wife that way? But another part of me, the part that had been carrying the betrayal and lies and manipulation for months, felt like liberated, vindicated, you know. Lauren didn't come back to the house that weekend. She stayed at the lake house with I don't know who. And when she finally came back Monday afternoon, I'd already changed the locks. She knocked and knocked, on the door screaming and crying, and I opened it with the chain on and handed her a box with her essential stuff, her clothes, her bathroom products, her documents, and told her everything else she could pick up with police supervision when we coordinated it. She tried to push the door, but I closed it and called the police myself to report the situation, explaining that we were in the process of divorce and she was trying to enter my property without permission. The following weeks were a legal and emotional mess. William handled everything from the legal side, and Lauren got her own lawyer, a woman who tried to argue that Lauren deserved significant alimony because she had sacrificed her career for the marriage, which was ridiculous considering she never had a career to sacrifice. But we had all the evidence of her plans, her intentions, her infidelity, and finally her lawyer recommended that she accept a 60-40 split of shared assets, which wasn't much because the house was mine, and my retirement account was protected, and a small sum of $800 a month for 6 months so she could get established, which I agreed to because I just wanted it all to be over. Several of the friends who were at that lake house contacted me afterwards. Stephanie wrote me a long message apologizing for not having seen the signs, saying that Lauren always acted like I was the problem in the marriage, that she constantly complained about me, but that now everything made sense. Christina told me that she and Tony had decided to cut contact with Lauren completely because what she did was unforgivable. Even Heather sent me a message saying that she had encouraged Lauren to be more ambitious with her life, but never knew that meant planning a strategic divorce and cheating on me, that if she'd known the full extent of the plan, she would have said something. I don't know if I completely believe her, but whatever. Lauren's family also found out about everything, obviously. Her younger sister, Kay, called me crying, saying she couldn't believe her sister had done that she'd always loved me as a brother-in-law and felt so much shame about the situation. Lauren's father found me at the supermarket like a month later and stopped me in the cereal aisle, literally put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Daniel, I'm so sorry about all this. I raised that girl better than this. I don't know what happened to her." It was awkward, but also like comforting to know that her own family was disappointed in her. Lauren ended up moving to her cousin Emma's apartment on the other side of town, and from what I heard through the grapevine, she's working at a retail store now. Which is ironic considering she spent years not working, waiting to find someone who'd support her better than I did. The divorce was finalized like 2 months ago, right before my 34th birthday, and we signed all the final papers in the lawyer's office without even looking each other in the eye. Now I'm like rebuilding my life, I guess. I joined a new gym because the old one had too many memories of her and her friends, and honestly, I've been going pretty regularly, like 5 times a week, and I feel good physically at least. I met someone there like 2 weeks ago, a woman named like Rachel or something. I'm still not sure if I'm ready to date anyone, but we exchanged numbers and we've talked a bit. Nothing serious. My friends have been incredible. Justin basically adopted me and takes me out to do stuff every weekend so I don't stay locked up at home feeling sorry for myself. The house feels weird now, like bigger and emptier without Lauren's stuff everywhere, without her music playing in the kitchen, without her products filling the bathroom. But it also feels more mine, if that makes sense. I changed the living room decor, painted the master bedroom a different color, bought new furniture for the living room, basically erased any trace of her and our marriage. Sometimes, I feel guilty about how I handled the final situation, about exposing her that way, in front of everyone, But then I remember that she spent months planning how to get money out of me and replace me while I paid all her bills and treated her like my partner, and the guilt goes away pretty quickly. I don't know what the lesson is here. I guess trust your instinct when things don't feel right. Don't ignore the warning signs just because confronting them is uncomfortable. And definitely check shared laptops from time to time because you never know what you're going to find. And if your wife has a folder called New Life Planning on her computer, it's probably time to get a lawyer.